Hi, Tanya. I am so glad that we finally get to sit down and celebrate your journey. And I'm just going to do a quick intro because I have been so excited to share this amazing mama's story for so many reasons I can't even begin to count. And as a quick introduction, Tanya is a doctor, a mother of three teenagers, and a truly beautiful human being who cares deeply about community, connection, and showing up as her best self. And she's also a graduate of our intuitive divorce coaching program. And while I want Tanya to share her own story in her own words, suffice it to say, like many can relate, by the time divorce was at her doorstep, she faced the harsh reality that she had lost so much of herself throughout her marriage. She found herself overwhelmed, lost, and swimming in emotions. Welcome to divorce. But Tanya also exemplifies what it means to divorce differently, to heal and to use this intensely private and painful experience to transform her life and, by extension, the lives of her children. And as I say over and over, witnessing a mother come back to her intuition and reclaim lost pieces of herself is a slice of grace that never gets old. So, I think a good place to start would be by asking you, Tanya, were you surprised about what came up for you emotionally during this process? And I'm actually referring more to your personal journey than to your legal one. For example, I don't think most people view divorce as an opportunity for healing.
Yeah, so as you know, a lot of things came up for me in this whole process. I think honestly, as I was reflecting on this, I just reminded, I think, just how the really destructive situation that I was in was affecting just every aspect of my life. I think that clearly, as I dug deep and asked myself, why did I stay in a marriage for so long? I mean, almost 25 years that I knew had so many red flags and was being really difficult and damaging and was not making me happy. It made me reflect on just why would I choose that? Why would I stay in that? It brought me back to thinking about things from my childhood and realizing and reflecting on the ways that I had honestly been groomed in childhood and grown up in dysfunctional situations that taught me that it was my job and my responsibility to prioritize other people's needs over my own, to take care of honestly the abusers, the people who were taking advantage of me in my life, and the ways that that mindset had really, I guess, continued into my adult life. There were a number of different ways that I was able to reflect back on difficult situations from my childhood and be able to say, but now I'm an adult and now I have choice. And what do I need to do to make different choices? And that ended up in some really challenging conversations, challenging reflections, but it led to me having a conversation with my mom that I've honestly known I've needed to have for probably 15 or 20 years and never had. It was in a lot of ways heartbreaking and heart wrenching. And also, there have been some real glimmers of hope and recognition on my mom's part. And it's not that my mom and I are now close, we're not, but I feel like I'm able to at least be able to engage in a more honest relationship with my mom. And I think that it's been really clear to me that I want to be able to be my authentic self in all of my relationships, and that has resulted in a lot of alterations. So definitely with childhood relationships. I also realized, I think that my Christian faith upbringing, that there were honestly a lot of things that I have just taken on as to, I really believed that it was my Christian duty, my wifely duty, my motherly duty to make things work with my marriage, and that I was failing my kids if I didn't make this marriage work. And it led me to dig deeper and recognize the ways that I was taking on responsibility for things that I couldn't control, and that was actually being really destructive, not only to myself, but to my husband. And honestly, one of the hardest things, even like this morning, I had a conversation with my middle child, just reflecting on how damaging that was all to my kids. I think in my trying to control things and trying to make things work, I was really blind to the pain and the like ways that I wasn't actually being present for my kids in the ways that they needed. And I think now seeing a shift in that, which is sometimes painful to hear about, but recognizing the ways that my attempts to make a marriage work that wasn't working was actually being really hurtful to my kids. And I wish I could go back and like have made those steps sooner and been more aware of that. But I'm thankful now that my kids are reflecting on this, that they are actually doing the hard work themselves of recognizing some of the family structures and things that were happening that were actually really hurtful to them, and being able to talk to me about it. That has been really beautiful. I have re-engaged with a group from my church, which has honestly been really a pretty amazing experience, and being able to have this group of women from all ages and be able to actually discuss the ways that I took on this burden of believing that I needed to make everything work, and have a group of women of all ages who honestly, I would say largely like would fall in the category of I don't believe in divorce, and then like walking with me and being able to see and share like and care about some of that like burden that I internalized, and having watching them listen to me and think about things differently has also been really cool. I don't know. I mean, it's transformed my
Okay,
relationship with my kids.
you you have literally dropped 100 golden nuggets. I don't even know where to unpack. I was like, and you know what? It also transported me back to this experience because obviously I've been intimately involved in this journey with you. First of all, I think so many women can just relate to, I wish I'd done it sooner. Well, forget about that. We are where we are, and we get where we get when we get there. Okay. And the biggest thing is just give yourself grace, because you were ready to deal with it now. You're ready to see what you see. You're ready to feel what you feel, and you're ready to know what you know. No more denying. And I love that you brought into this whole notion of like kind of just like programming that we come into the world. We sort of just accept this role of like who I am as mother, who I am as wife, who I am as community member, who I am in my church, who I am in my office. But we forget to actually ask ourselves, who are we? And does this feel authentic and aligned with us at this point in our life? Because obviously we change decade to decade to decade. And we're allowed to have desires, wants, and needs. And we are allowed to be able to tap into our intuition and say, is this aligned with who I am and how I want my life to be? Or, because we can only suppress those feelings that we've been shoving aside for so long. They're going to come out. They're going to find their way out one way or another. And I also loved how you brought into this conversation how you kind of like perceived, well, if I leave, I'm ruining my children or I'm damaging my children. Not telling the other side of the story, which is maybe I'm damaging them by staying.
Yeah.
I have really not known many women to lean in as much as you did. I think you might have been a little surprised about everything that came up, but it was because it was like, okay, we're going to heal, bring it on. Most women don't think of divorce as synonymous with opportunity for healing, right? And I think I also had mentioned to you that it's like, if you kind of say those words to a woman, it's like, oh, no. Like, that's enough. Divorce is enough for me. I don't need to do like the healing work on top of it. But it's part and parcel because it's the whole of you. And you want to create sustainable change in your life. Doesn't mean it's easy, But when we're ready to look at this stuff, when we're ready to say, like, I can't tolerate this anymore. I'm not happy in this marriage. I'm not happy in my body. I'm not happy in this life right now. And I need to put boundaries in place, or I need to lean into my intuition. I need to recollect lost pieces and parts of myself. Then you're ready to see all of it. And there's no compartmentalizing. It's like we were saying off camera earlier. It's not, divorce is not all about running out and getting a shark of a lawyer or speaking with your financial advisor or getting a co-parenting counselor. You can't put the self-care piece of this and the feelings piece of it and the you piece of it to the side.
Mhm.
And you just are like the poster child for really leaning into this. Tanya and I were talking briefly before we got on, and I asked her, how did it feel to read my celebratory notes in preparation for this interview? Because far too often women just keep going. They just keep going and they're so busy and they achieve a goal and then they're on to the next thing because they have another task or that, the to-do list is never checked off, right? And so it's one of the reasons that I really wanted to sit down and talk to you. And I wanted to reflect back to you just how much celebration there has been in your journey. I'm glad you brought the mother piece in because there are ways, and everybody's relationships are different, but it will bring these things up. Because if you're really leaning in, it's going to bring this stuff up. And that doesn't mean it's going to be rainbows and unicorns and you're going to heal all relationships. But you had important conversations with your mom, which was advocating for yourself. You had important conversations with your church, which was saying, this is how I can show up and this is who I am. I can't squish
But it
myself
will
into a
bring
little
these
box any
things up.
longer.
Because if you're really leaning in, it's going to
And
bring this
you
stuff
are
up.
breaking the patterns of the lineage. It's like a cycle breaker. And you're showing your children that it's safe to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I think it has reformed my relationship with my kids too. This is a good time to like reflect on this because the last few weeks have been somewhat challenging times with my kids actually, but I think
You
it
do
is
have
really,
3 teenagers.
I know, I know. It's actually been really helpful to kind of reflect on the like where things were and be able to think through some of, I guess, honestly, the habits and the ways of interacting and building relationship that my kids were learning. There's still a lot going on. There's still co-parenting. There's still a lot of dynamics. There's still a lot where they're getting different messages in different places. But it's really also amazing to see my kids advocating for themselves. It's painful to watch them having to struggle with some of that, but it's also a really beautiful thing, I guess, to see the progress they're making and to just as far as owning and being comfortable with who they are and what they want and being able to articulate that. Because I think we've talked about this before, but it's really striking to me. None of my 3 kids have ever suggested that Peter and I go back to living together. They have never, ever questioned that. And more are actually sharing about the difficulty of the tension that was always there and just the ways that they're being able to now see and reflect on things that I think they didn't have the safety or the space to reflect on before.
I just have to interrupt that because I don't want to gloss over that. That is so monumental. Okay, listen, as mamas, we would stand before an oncoming train if we could stop our children from experiencing pain, right? We'd do anything.
Yeah.
When they're in pain, I always say when something's wrong with my son, nothing is right with the world, right? That said, it's a part of the human experience. We have to allow their experiences. We have to allow them to feel what they feel, love who they love. But because you took care of yourself, you, the mothership, you grounded yourself, you did the work, you leaned in and got really solid. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt when they're in pain, but it means that you are here to sit beside them, to guide them, to witness them, to hear them. And it's safe for them to express what their experience is. And there is no greater gift than that. We would love to say, like, okay, give me all your pain. I'll take it. We can't do that. But what you're doing, I mean, like, think about how different your life may have been, or my life may have been, if we had that same experience with our parents, or we had had that same communication, or we had been given those skills and those tools and that safety.
So many different times when like my kids, I just held them while they were crying and being like, like that's not really an experience that I've had. I don't remember sitting and just crying and my mom just holding me, or even honestly, like with my husband, and being able to have my kids have that space. I can see the difference of them coming to me when they're upset and coming and asking for comfort, which is not something that I did as a child.
I mean, that makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
Well, teenagers crawling up in your arms and just say, you know what I really need is to be held. Yeah. Think about that. That's really the truth for all of us. Oftentimes, no one else can fix our problems or control situations for us or change our experience. Yeah. But the most powerful thing you can do is witness someone, be present with them, hold them. Hold them. And to that point, I want to move into something else because I want to ask you, because I always think about this. I want to ask you, do you know when I knew you were going to be okay? Do you know when I knew you'd cross the bridge?
It was when I did, but I don't know when you.
well, sitting over here, I trust the divine timing of every mama. But I never know. I mean, there are times where I have mothers, I don't think they'll ever stop crying, or I don't think they're ever going to stop raging. And I mean, I know they will, but it's like, I just don't know what the timing is. But for you, I really knew witnessing you when it was the day that you started sending me pictures of sunsets. You started texting me, like out of the blue. We would text often back and forth, and you would tell me something was going on, or there might have been a crisis, or there was something with a lawyer, or whatever. And then suddenly, maybe peppered in there, because like divorce was still going on, but you started sending me pictures of sunsets. And I'll never forget it. And then you posted in our private Facebook group, and that set off like an entire beauty contest. And mothers across the country started snapping pictures and posting their nature walks and their fall foliage. And you had inspired this awakening of what I call noticing things, noticing things that feel good. Yes, in the mess. Even in the mess, I can still be alive and I can still appreciate things. And when you can start to see the beauty around you, yes, even in the messiness, you are starting to recover and rebuild, exhale, and feel alive again. And another example of this was from the weekend you texted me about just saying, that's it. Like, I'm like, so like up to here with the paperwork and the meetings and the lawyers and the mediation or whatever. And you said, I'm putting my divorce to the side and I'm going to be intensely present and silly with my kids. And it was really healing. And it was a much needed day for all of you. And I would love if you would share a little bit about that. And also just speak to how you did that. How did you step out of the chaos and finally just reclaim that weekend?
I think one of the things that I realized was how much energy and time and focus I had been putting on keeping my husband happy. And I realized, honestly, when he moved out, how much more time I had with my kids, how much more energy I had for my kids. And I mean, it was just kind of very, very eye-opening as to the amount of time and energy that was going into that, and that seeing just the goodness of being able to just truly be present with my kids. I mean, how it happened, it was all like very spontaneous. But that weekend, yeah, it was so
it's being
much
present,
fun.
But you're so fun. Tell us a little bit about it, because it was such a fun story.
My kids had been kind of grumpy, and my youngest and I had actually gone to World Market, and for some reason that set my youngest off on being excited about making presents and getting presents for other people, which is something that I love to do. So it was very fun for me to see my youngest like taking that on and being really excited about that. But then I came home, and that sparked my younger two deciding that they wanted to decorate the house, and they initially got out the Thanksgiving decorations, and then they also wanted to set up the Christmas tree and do Christmas decorations. And in getting out the Christmas tree, then it was like in my closet with like my wedding dress and dress that I had worn to a ball like years ago. And so then we were just being goofy and I was like, oh, I should try them on. So the kids like tried them on and then I tried them on and it was really fun. And then the kids wanted to, they're like, we're going to do your hair and makeup. And then my youngest kept, Mom, you need to cut your hair.
Oh yeah. By the way, when I first met Tanya, Tanya's hair was like down to her hips.
Yeah. It's always been, it's been long since I was in middle school, probably, but at least through high school. At the hospital, people constantly refer to me with the doctor with the long curly hair. So it's gotten noticed. I've been back at work, but yeah, I don't know. We did a ton of decorating. The kids, like, each of them decided that the house needed to smell like Christmas. And so they were doing all kinds of, I just had all different things on the stove and we had just danced around with ball dresses and it was a very, very fun weekend. And I think very much like just a positive time that I needed. And I think the kids needed kind of in somewhat being able to see and celebrate how much things had changed. And I think also, honestly, like preparing for what was to come, a little bit of like the eye in the middle of this, the calm in the middle of the storm. But yeah, it was a really fun time.
But as you have heard me say many times, two truths can coexist. And you could be in the middle of a very painful experience, but it doesn't mean your life stops, especially when you have children. Like, you can't put your life on hold. So I know it's hard, but it just that weekend, like I remember you coming to class and sharing that, and everybody was like, it just sounded so much fun and so silly and so present. And you know what? And the divorce was waiting for you on Monday. It was fine. But in the meantime, it was soul food, right? It was soul food for all of you.
Yeah.
I want to move on. And of course, I have to mention one of the most badass moves you made. One that has since inspired so many mamas, and it is so aligned with our mission to save time, money, and heartache. Could you tell us about the day that you threw in the towel on mediation and what you did next?
I knew that I was gonna make it. I think just you often talked about like being the CEO of your divorce, and I had the experience of in different roles that I had actually sitting in the room often with a CEO and in the meetings and had been even from that like walked away and I'm like someday I'm gonna like be CEO of something. I didn't envision that being CEO of my divorce, but that was not my goal. But mediation is honestly being very expensive. It was going nowhere. We kept talking about the same things over and over again. And I felt like I was clear on my priorities. I wanted to stay in the house. I had different ways that I wanted to divide things. I had it all worked out, except for it didn't work. Plan A, B, C, like none of them worked. And every step was just being incredibly difficult and not really moving forward. And so I finally, I think, became super clear. My number one priority was recognizing that I needed freedom. I needed space for my own mental health and well-being. And that I also needed to be able to have at least a reasonable degree of the ability to have financial freedom. I've been the breadwinner and that I needed to be able to control at least some of the money that I was earning in a way. And it became clear to me that if I had those two things, that then I would be far more able to support my kids and to like work through whatever else needed to happen. And so with the clarity of what mattered most, then I was able to just shift things and think about things from a different perspective and rework the realizing that it in fact was not going to work for me to stay in the house, that was going to be months and months of trying to constantly deal with Peter in the house, and that I needed to figure out a different way to do alimony, that it needed to be a lump sum and not something that was constantly controlling my decisions. And so I shifted in a big way and like talked to my lawyer. I talked to Kristen about it.
Well, yeah. Well, wait a minute. We have to just because okay. First of all, listen. I applaud you for diving into mediation with gusto, and you really wanted this to succeed. All we can do is take a step and then wait to see how it unfolds. We don't control all aspects of it. No divorce is linear. Nothing is cookie cutter. But the key thing is that when you recognize, I'm not getting anywhere here. This is really frustrating. I'm not getting anywhere. I need to pivot. And because, is it suffice to say, because of how you had gotten yourself grounded, how you allowed yourself to like really kind of lean into considering what's really coming up for me? How am I really feeling about this? I remember that you called me and you said, and I'm going to use your words exactly. You're like, I have a cockamamie idea. And I was like, bring it on. Tell me what it is. She's the one that came up with this whole notion that, you know what? It's clear to me that I don't want to have continuous attachment every month where I have to send money and I have to be whatever. I just want a settlement. I want a settlement. I want to be done. I want to get this over with. And I was like, you know what? Amazing. Get on the hopper with your lawyer, who had the same response. And I'll let you finish the story.
I literally said to my lawyer at one point in time, because she wanted to have this proposal, like have every little detail like worked out and all tweaked. And I finally was like, can we please just send it to them? So rather than guessing at what all they're wanting, we can actually hear the specifics of like where the concerns are, rather than trying to address all of the concerns ahead of time. So then that was able to like move forward and send a proposal, and we got responses back. And I think being able to like use my intuition, use the things that you kept telling me, like, but leaning in and like, I do actually know Peter. I do know what he wants. So we would get things back, and I was able to pretty quickly be like, Peter cares about this. These other things are from his lawyer. And with the mediator, like kind of ask and clarify that, and realize that I was right about several of the things that were being added in there were from his lawyer and not things that Peter actually cared about. And so we're able to kind of respond and use that intuition in a way that I hadn't really been used to. I think that before I had always thought about decision making in a way of the like, how do I take what I know about this person to give them what they want and need, rather than like actually kind of thinking about how things were playing out, but recognize.
Or what about what I want?
Like what I want and need.
What do I want and need, right?
So, and then there were a couple of different times where they were just like, they had the numbers. And honestly, like when we were trying to do a like month to month number, we were so far apart, and we were able to get to a lump sum number. I mean, we're still far apart, but like when you start to like go down to it, I'm like, listen, like we're like $20,000 apart at this point in the scheme of like, we're spending $10,000 on mediation today. So like
$10,000 a minute, let's go.
Like, and yeah, there were different, like, or they're like, oh, like this isn't, we're going to just end up with a partial agreement. And we started, I'm like, no, like, let's get this done. And we were able to, and like push through and ended up with having an entire settlement document that was done really in one mediation session.
I'm really glad you brought the CEO piece into this, because really what it means to be a CEO is it's not that you have all the answers or a crystal ball to know what comes next, but you know to put people around you that are aligned with your mission, that are listening to you, that are going to get the job done, that are going to give you good advice. Because at the end of the day, we know lawyers are going to go home, financial advisors are going to go home, and you're going to be left with the ramifications of the decisions that you made. So you really want to make sure that you are guiding this process and that you are stepping up and saying, hey, you know what? This doesn't feel good. Or by the way, and I actually hope you don't beat yourself up about all that came before in terms of the mediation and all the time that you spent in it, because it kind of all was just gathering, as we always say, gathering intel. And the point being that as you leaned into your intuition, as you leaned into being grounded and solid, you were really able to think clearly. You were really able to become present with your kids. You were able to take pictures of sunsets. You were able to live like you were coming back to life again and breathing. When I think of you, I think that really exemplifies what it means to be a CEO.
Kristen, I think like you said, there's so many different points in there that you said that I would just wholeheartedly agree with. I think that one of the things that's so hard about divorce is that there's so many different components. There's all of the life going on. There's all of the emotions that go with it. And I know with one of those first two sessions, something had come up right before, and I like knew going into it, I knew that I was like too angry to be in a good place for mediation. But the like crappy thing of divorce is you don't get that time. Sometimes it just is what it is, and you still have to like show up and do your best. But I think that there was the time and the process, and that I needed some of that time to be able to work through some of those emotions, to be able to show up more clear headed and having worked through some of that. And I also think the piece that you talked about related to the CEO, that then I was able to like get to a better place of having built some of the trust that was needed with my lawyer, of her being able to actually trust and hear me, and having seen some of the games that Peter was playing for herself and actually getting frustrated with some of that for herself. I think that process was necessary. And I think that honestly, it would have been better, I think, if plan A, B, C, or D like would have worked. And I don't regret having tried those, because I think honestly, those would have met more of the things that would have been better for my kids and would have been an easier process. And I do think that I needed that time for like clarity, because I ended up having to choose. Like I ended up having to realize that what it was going to cost in time and money and energy and emotion wasn't worth fighting for with some of those other things, and that there were other ways to have sunrises in other places. After I moved, sent a sunrise picture, a sunset picture for my new location, realizing that sunrises and sunsets still happen other places.
Isn't that the truth?
The other piece that you brought in with the CEO, which I am glad you brought up, because the other thing that I think where I shifted was both in being a leader and being clear on what I wanted, but also in doing a better job of relying on my lawyer for her expertise, and doing a better job of sometimes saying, no, like we need to move it this way. And other times saying, well, there were times where she like called me out. I'm like, you're being contradictory. You're saying this and you're saying this. It can't work both ways. Or with different, and saying like, okay, well, this is important to me and this is important to me. I don't know the legal system. I don't know how that works legally. You tell me how I do this. And I think that was a much more a posture and interaction where she then was able to actually step in and provide the legal advice that I needed, and be able to do more ownership. Where I think before I often was honestly in a space of just being really angry and scared and hurt, and not as much able to be in control of, in a way to be able to actually allow her to do her job too.
That's a huge point, because this is why attorneys always love working with us and referring clients to us, because we help them do their job. We help them because they are not the ones to help you sit there and work through all your emotions. They're there for their expertise and to help you get through that legal process. Because listen, a mama going through divorce is awash with emotions. There's no denying that. It's very hard to compartmentalize that, but it's also really hard to sort of like separate that from the tough decisions that you have to make in divorce. So that's part of being the CEO, right?
Yeah, but I think that's a really important point, that I needed to get to a place where I could, in fact, like have a trusting relationship with my lawyer, where I trusted her, she trusted me, and I was able to step back and say, these are the things I want and need. How do I make that happen? Honestly, it's happened a lot of times where she told me things that I didn't want to hear, that like didn't go how I wanted them to, and to be able to let her do her job in that too.
Yeah, and also to lean in and listen to her and to defer to her expertise, because if your attorney is really advising you, this is not a good path, the likelihood of achieving this objective is slim.
Yeah.
What's the price you're going to put on that? You're going to drain your bank account and your life force, and you're going to waste your precious time with your kids. So we don't necessarily like everything we're going to hear, but our future and our freedom is really priceless, and that of your children. So I would like to ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing the words you spoke to our class on the last day. And I'd also love it if you'd share your impressions of the power of group work and when women join together.
I'll start with the kind of the power of group work. I mean, I think with this group, it was so helpful to me to be able to listen to other people's experiences. It was honestly comforting and reassuring to recognize that other women were struggling with a lot of the same things that I was when I was wrestling with like insecurity as a mom and seeing all the ways that my husband was attacking me on that. And then I saw other moms experiencing that. It was really painful and hard to see people struggling with this, but so, so helpful and grounding to be able to recognize that unfortunately that can be part of the process and it doesn't actually reflect on me. And it was really helpful to be able to talk that through myself, but then several other times hear other people talk that through and that experience. I remember one specific mom who was part of the group and was struggling with what to me was very, very obvious that the things that her spouse was saying just did not make any sense and were not based in reality. And be able to watch that and have such clarity about that for myself, and yet be able to see how tangled and twisted she was about it, and be able to reflect that in the group a little bit, hear other people do that, and then later step back and be like, I think those were actually words that I needed to hear, in recognizing and seeing in other people the ways that it's so difficult to see some of the patterns that are happening that you've just grown to expect as normal, or the ways that people are twisting and manipulating a situation, that it starts to feel like, well, maybe I'm the problem, or that you start to like really question your reality. It is just so helpful to be able to hear that in other people and reflect that, and then be able to see how much that was also true in my own life and just get that. It's really great to have a group of people who is living the same life. So, I mean, I actually participated a little bit in like local divorce support group, and it was so different. Honestly, like it was so depressing. It was so depressing. And like this group was so much different than that. I left every single time just feeling really uplifted and encouraged. And like I had been growing and had healing myself and with energy to kind of go through that next week. This was a group who I could relate to, and a group where the experiences that other people were having were similar.
Well, the thing is also, it reminds me of what we were speaking about earlier about your children and creating a safe space for them to be seen and heard. And women going through divorce need that. They need a place where they can just come and let it rip. Like some days it's crying, some days it's raging, some days it's just being held and witnessed and seen. And there's great reflection. I was just reminded of this today because I have a mama who's in our current cohort who's in crisis right now. She had some pretty dramatic events just happen, and she's been communicating with me. And I was tentatively saying, like, I'm hoping you're going to be able to be in class tomorrow, but obviously not knowing like what the circumstances of her life were going to be tomorrow. And she just texted me back right away and she said, oh, I am there. I need my tribe.
Yeah.
And it just landed on me. And I was like, yeah, this is what we created. And mamas come to that class. I mean, sometimes they're like in scrubs in the operating room. Sometimes they're in their cars. Sometimes they're hiding in their closet from their kids. Like wherever, they just get resourceful about carving this time out for themselves. And women that carve a little bit of time out for themselves are the women that move their needle in a very different direction and begin to lean into their intuition and are able to divorce differently. And it's so beautiful to see.
So the thing that I said with class that is so very, very true is that I am so, so thankful for this group and this experience. And it was by far the best return on investment for any of the money that I spent in the divorce, as far as obviously with the divorce process, with getting through it, with parenting, but also just in coming out the other side so much more comfortable and so much happier and fulfilled with who I am. Kristen, you haven't heard this, but I rounded this last week so we were taking care of patients in the hospital and supervising the residents for the first time in 9 months. So I was worried that with not having seen patients for 9 months, that I would be just cloudy on things or have forgotten medicine or just not really be at my best. And it was so dramatic. I was so much clearer. I was able to be present and focused and articulate and able to honestly do a really good job of taking care of really complicated patients and teaching the residents in a way that I haven't been able to do probably in 20 years. And so, we talk about like the different things and seeing the like slow change, but I hadn't done it for 9 months and it was so dramatic. It felt so
I
good.
can't even tell you how happy that makes me. Well, first of all, it doesn't surprise me. And I'm just going to say, letting Tanya out of the class was like, when she graduated, it was like, no, don't go. We all love you and we miss you. But I'm going to just also say, so people understand, this is another thing that was so wonderful. I mean, Tanya also leaned in and realized that she had never availed herself of this opportunity to take some leave. And she had worked so hard and been so successful in her career and was just such a workhorse, like taking care of her family and her house and all the things, that when this was approved, when she knew, I really need to take a break so that I can take care of myself, take care of my family, take care of my divorce, and push this across the finish line. And that was challenging. That was challenging for her to do, to advocate for herself. And in doing so, it went so smoothly. So it absolutely does not surprise me that you have returned to work an even better, more fortified, more intuitive, more grounded, more graceful, beautiful you. Doesn't surprise me at all. And I'm
No,
so,
but
so happy for you and all the people that get to be touched by you, which is really amazing. So I'm going to listen, I could talk to you for like obviously 6 days, but I'm gonna just ask you, do you have any parting words? Like what would you say to another mama right now who stands where you once stood? What would you want her to know?
just that you're worth it. Take the time to invest in yourself and have a group and support that encourages you to do that. I'm so, so thankful that I made the decision to join this group and get the support. And it was actually, I think, honestly, the hand of God. I don't know. I mean, I accidentally sent a text to my husband related to this group, which resulted in him like really losing it and like being in a very, very controlling, manipulative way. And it's just, I guess, so rewarding, I think, to see. I mean, things remain, there's lots of messes, but the investment with this group and in myself has made the entire process with divorce so much better, so much easier, so much more fulfilling, if that seems like a weird word to use in this process, but I think it's true. And so much more rewarding to be able to see the benefits to myself, to my kids, to people around me, honestly. And it is really great to be part of a group where not only can you be supported and welcomed and feel like you belong, but to be able to share that with other people too and have new people come in and be part of that support structure has just been a really beautiful thing. So invest in you because you're worth it.
That's the tagline, right? Invest in you, because we often say that the tools and strategies and muscles that you learn to flex in this program, they're not just divorce skills. These are life skills. This is really just coming back to yourself. This is really about kind of like cutting out all the noise of the world and really coming back into your intuition, getting grounded, taking care of yourself so that you can navigate this difficult situation. And by the way, the human experience is full of difficult situations. Maybe not as difficult as divorce, but there are bumps in the road, and it does transform how you move forward in life. So when the next bump in the road, which will obviously, hopefully be a much smaller one, occurs, you really approach it differently, and you really can trust yourself and be much calmer about it. And that, for me, is one of the greatest things. And also just knowing that your children are witnessing that, and they too are learning how to move differently in the world. And that's a slice of grace. So, Tanya, I can't thank you enough for sharing a slice of your story with us. And I know it will touch and inspire other women to believe that this can be possible for them too, and that they can lean into their own healing and divorce differently.
Thank you.
Thank you for being you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being in our program. Thank you for inspiring us all. And thank you for being here today.
And my pleasure. Thank you, Kristen.